Okay. Hey, welcome. New week, new episode, KUDEN Radio. It's Daichi Miller here from Warrior Concepts on onlineninjaacademy.com. So please hold on to the bar. All right. So anyway, so both my teacher, right, Bujinkan Soke Masaki Hatsumi, for those of you who don't know, the Dalai Lama of Tibet, for those of you who are within the Mikyo Vajrayana circles may know that, and my own Mikyo teacher, Reverend Jikai, have they've all taught and emphasized the importance of like mindfulness, right, in words, in speech, in action, um, specifically highlighting like I don't know, potential negative consequences. Those are big words, right? But the possibility for things just not going the way we want them to be going. And if we don't know that this is going on, then this is something that if we're not actively ferreting it out, if we're not paying attention to what's going on, we can either think that we're absolutely helpless or that it's the will of the universe that we suck or whatever, right? But in reality, it may be the effect of careless language, right? So during this episode, what I want to do is I want to take a look at a few of these things, right? A few of the quotes from like Hatsumi Sensei, something from the Dalai Lama, as well as some common phrases that are pretty popular, right? I don't know how far extending within the Western world. My friends from the UK and Australia and whatnot can tell me if these things resonate in your direction as well, or you can just tell me how they kind of convert. But as far as the U.S. and American English and those kind of things, right? There are these phrases that people use that actually started out, right, when they were first created. They had a very different meaning from the way people are using them today. And unfortunately, the way they're being used today actually serves, well, most of them are opposite what the original intent was, but they're actually serving to either diminish somebody's potential, right? Diminish our potential, or excuse, I don't know, laziness. Okay. So anyway, we're going to talk about that and more when we get back. So let's go ahead and fire things up, and I'll see you shortly. Question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio, real training for real people in a real world. And it's still my story. So, hey, welcome back. I'm trying to prop my notes here where I can like read them and still look like I'm engaging with you guys. I've got like 4 pages of notes. This is one of those episodes where I really wanted to hone in and stay focused on things. So anyway, welcome back. If you're just joining us, the focus of this episode is on right speech. It's on different approaches to speech and the use of words and phrases and things like that, from a perspective of how, if we're not careful, they can undermine our potential. They can they can completely distort our perception of ourselves and what our capabilities are, and things like that, right? So in Japanese, in Bushido, there are these 8 virtues, and we're not going to go through the virtues or anything like that. I'm just highlighting one, right? So if you caught the promotional stuff that went out, you know what it is. And if you didn't, well, here we are, okay? So the word is Makoto, right? Makoto, Makoto, right? So Makoto, like a lot of Japanese words, have a broad cross-section of meanings and things like that. But they all kind of lead us to a kind of a common understanding. All right. So Makoto it's the virtue of sincerity, truthfulness. It can also imply truth itself, right? Um, I did say truthfulness, honesty, those kind of things, right? And so we're going to be taking a look at this from two perspectives, right? Because this is going on both externally and internally, right? The way we use our words and whatnot to communicate with others, but also the way we use our words and the way we communicate with ourselves, and the relationship on both sides. Okay, so one of the most surprising things early on in my training in Ninjutsu was when Hatsumi Sensei taught about fights being relationships, right? And he wasn't talking about arguments at that point. He was talking about, fisticuffs and how they're relationships. Now, albeit they're negative relationships, but how we approach things from a perspective of honesty and authenticity. Right? And again, right, as a young martial artist and a police officer and a soldier, and really tough getting my head wrapped around this, because up until that point, self-defense was self-defense, and you might as well put an equal sign next to it and put the word fighting after that, because the only difference was a moral high ground. But what he was talking about was, when you're dealing with a problem, or when you're dealing with this particular individual, right? There's a sense of honesty and sincerity and truth and truthfulness and whatnot to that engagement, but it's not the same way that most people think of in a day-to-day interaction, right? On the first side of it, we want to make sure that we're being very honest about what's going on, right? We're not superimposing our beliefs or assumptions or whatever. We need to be able to deal with what's going on as it is. Otherwise, we're just focusing on our style or our techniques or our bullshit and just throwing shit out there. Okay. So we're going to be honest that way. Sincerity is often reflected on when I land that shot or apply that technique, right? I'm not half-assing it, right? If I'm going to hit somebody, I'm going to hit them. It's kind of like when I first learned to use firearms, right? One of the very first lessons was, you don't point that thing at anybody that you're not intending to shoot, right? It's the same thing, right? So if I'm going to hit them, I need to make sure that I can hit them. But see, there's an honesty behind that as well, right? What's the honesty? Okay? The honesty is, I better have trained to make sure that my strikes have the kind of bite that he can pick up on that sincerity, that I absolutely am sincere about whooping your ass. Okay. And every one of these things that touch you are going to break you. Okay. There is no kind of wishy-washiness about it. Okay. So Makoto, right? This is a very, very important concept, not just in Bushido, but in general Japanese society. Okay? And you'll see, I've got, like I said, I think one or two quote. I've got, I think, one primary quote from Hatsumi Sensei and one from the Dalai Lama that highlight this pretty much. But anyway, so, but where there are these 8 virtues, there are also these are also subdivided into what are typically known as character strengths, right? And depending on the list that you see, and with the virtues, right? I'm listing 8 now. It's the list that I tend to go by, but there's another list that only lists 7. Okay, but the character strengths, right, the list that I have takes these 8 virtues and breaks them out into 24 character strengths. Right? It's kind of like in Mikyo. We've got karma, and we have the eightfold, or the noble eightfold path, of which right speech is one of them. Right, these 8 areas of our lives that we should be mindful of, so as to not produce more dukkha. right? More, and that's the actual Sanskrit name for those of you who've never heard it before, right? It's pain, suffering, discontent, dissatisfaction, those kind of things, right? Which the opposite then would be, if we're mindful of it, is to generate and produce more happiness, right? Right. So, but the Makoto is related to the character strengths of things like social intelligence, right? Knowing how to fit in and how to engage, right? And not be I don't know, the outcast, the asshole, the my way or the highway. You can play well with others, right? And know how to do that within the circle. And if you're not going to do that, then go find another damn circle. Okay. It's one of the problems on social media, right? People don't play well with others. And then what ends up happening is Facebook police step in, and then, right here in the States, we have this thing called a constitution and freedom of speech and whatnot. But, right, I get it, right? You need to play nice and whatnot, but I don't need Gestapo coming along with rules enforcing freedom of speech. Okay. Freedom of speech for a lot of people is they're free to say whatever they want, but they're going to censor other people's speech because that's not nice. Okay. Anyway, so social intelligence, judgment. Okay. And again, not the judgment that most people use. This isn't, judging someone. Judgment here on the mandala comes from the idea of the capacity of the discerning mind, right? The concept or the context, the skill of discernment, right? Knowing what's really right and what's really wrong, regardless of what the rule sets are. Okay, knowing what's right and appropriate or wrong and inappropriate given context in any given situation, right? And then another one is perspective, right? Perspective, being able to see things, not only being able to see things as they are from your vantage point, but also to be able to recognize that what you see is based on your vantage point. Okay? So often when you hear me teaching, or when someone asks me a question, very often what I lead off with is based on my experience, based on what you've told me, and right, the way I would go about things. Sometimes what I say, especially if somebody says, if you were me, what would you have done? Okay. Well, one, given that I can only operate based on what the information that you've given me. Okay. And I'm going to make a leap here and trust that that's true and as clear as you can convey it, knowing that there's always three sides in any given situation, right? There's your side, my side, and what really happened. Okay. But I also inject the I'm not you. So based on the information you gave me and based on my personality type and the way I tend to operate, this is what I would have done. However, this is not advice. Okay. People often ask for advice, looking for a scapegoat. So if it doesn't work out, right, then they get somebody else to blame. He told me to do it. No, you ask for advice. You ask for an alternate opinion, an alternate view. Okay, you ultimately carried it out. That's the thing about being a warrior, about being a leader, about being somebody who's in behind the steering wheel, right, of their own life. Okay. Anyway, so there's many more, right? There's a couple of other ones on this one. I'm just going to stop there. We don't need to keep belaboring things. But anyway, so again, I mentioned this already in our Nimpo Mikyo. One of the 8 areas of our lives that it's heavily suggested, right, that we should be mindful of because of its influence over our happiness, our experience, our depth and breadth of experience with life, is right speech. And again, people get these things that have been
very just haphazardly translated into English. Uh, and from the wrong perspective, right view, right perspective, that's another one. But from the wrong perspective, we can see this as like a dogmatic thing, right? Here are the official rules. It's kind of like on the dojo floor. Somebody will do something and turn around and go, "Can I do that?" Well, you just did. Yeah, I know, but is that official for this art? Okay, so now we need to have a discussion about the art. Case in point, I have a group running through the relaunch of our module 3, so intermediate. Um, it's one of the intermediate stages, intermediate 1 stage in our white to black belt curriculum. Excuse me. And during this week's technique videos, there are two techniques that they're getting. One specifically, the other one can be adapted this way. There's an uppercut punch in the technique being demonstrated. And during the lesson, during the recording of the lesson, James was there, as a matter of fact. He's the one I hit with the uppercut. So, but the point I was making was there are going to be lots of people who would see this lesson and just go absolutely batshit crazy because in Ninjutsu we don't have uppercuts. Really? Who the hell told you that? Well, that's not in the it's not in the techniques. Really? Huh. Interesting. Sounds like somebody needs to go back to school. Anyway, but we do have 9 directional striking with each fist or each weapon, and so you know whether I use a palm strike or I turn my hand around backwards and I strike through one of the Togakure Ryu Kamae, called Tate no Kamae or Hapogakure no Kamae, right? Right. But what can happen is people end up classifying things based on style, right? We don't do that. That's what boxers do. We don't kick like that. That's what Taekwondo people do. We don't. Anyway, so but we have this concept of right speech, but right here again is appropriate, right, and appropriate given context. Okay, so what's the goal? What's the goal? Right, and this is both external speech and internal. Okay, often people when we do the Sanmitsu, the triple secrets of thought, word, and deed. I know this happened to me for a long time, where and again, rough translations, right? Where I thought the thought part was all the stuff that was going on in the mind, and then speech was just talking, right? And then deed, well, that's easy. That's just doing, right? Except that speech, right? When I'm talking, I am doing something, right? There's action going on, okay? So how am I moving my mouth in a way that allows me to enunciate and pronounce words correctly and not come across all mush mouth, right? So that the other person can understand what I'm saying clearly, right? Or am I using vocabulary that they don't understand, or whatever? Okay. So mind or thought, right? Thought is more about intent, and it's a bunch of subconscious stuff, beliefs and viewpoints and perspectives and all that stuff that actually comes before. Okay, so speech is actually a product of mind. It's actually a bridge between the internal and the external. So it's a bridge between mind and the action, because you are actively doing things. It's not as cut and dry, black and white, 1, 2, 3, as ego would like to try to make it. But anyway, so I had mentioned that I pulled a couple of quotes, right? So one from the Dalai Lama, he said, happiness is not something ready-made, right? It comes from your own actions, right? What this implies is that words and actions, right? Speech is an action, contributes to our overall well-being and happiness. Okay? Happiness, like enlightenment, okay, is not something that you seek outside of yourself. Right? It's a byproduct of karma. karma means action. So it's part of the cause and effect chain, right? The depth or the level of our experience when it comes to happiness or mastery or the bite in that punch that I'm going to land. Remember that sincerity, right? I am sincere with my strike. I do mean to break parts of your body. Otherwise, I'm not going to be hitting you. Is the level of it is in direct proportion to the thoughts and words and actions and effort and whatever that we do to intentionally create that outcome or to allow ourselves to experience that outcome. It's not outside of ourselves. Because if we look for it outside of ourselves, then what happens? Well, it's the first time that person who makes me happy disappoints me, well, then my happiness quotient goes down. The first time I don't get that thing, or I lose that thing that I really wanted, right? Thought I'd have forever, well, happiness goes down. All those kind of things, right? So it's just a very different kind of idea, right? So okay, Hatsumi Sensei, my teacher, one of the lessons that he taught was that in Budo, the way you speak is as important as the way you move. Okay? Your words should reflect the precision and respect inherent in the art. Okay? So the whole idea is we should be as disciplined with our speech as we are with our physical movements. Okay? Now, I know I'm singing to the chorus here because you guys train hard. You're very specific about things. You don't jump around from topic to topic, those kind of things, right? So, but for a lot of folks, right, there's a lot of head nodding that goes on. But when I say that, when I repeat his lesson that you should be as disciplined with your speech as you are with your physical movements, we've all seen the videos. So anyway. Right? And that doesn't mean that things need to be karate crisp. It's not about that, right? It's about authenticity. It's about, right? One of the things that my first teacher in the art, Stephen Hayes, he actually had a degree in theater, right, from college, and so that crossed over a lot into our training. Not that we were acting out like you be the Iga ninja, I'll be the Koga ninja, or you be the samurai, and I'll be not that kind of thing. We were always influenced, right? It was always suggested that we practice with our partner as though we were highly paid stuntmen or stunt people, right? In a very high budget movie. And what that means is that even though we were, making safe contact with each other and things were slowed down for safety and whatnot, we should be moving and look like this was an actual full-on fight, right? One of the things I'm going to be covering with some students coming up, both in that Dominate and Win, the Mod 3 relaunch program, as well as some things that black belts need to work on a little bit more. And that is in on the uke side of simulating the response to each of the moves in a given technique. For example, something I've been noticing quite a bit is I'm just going to pick a technique where it just screams. So this is Ganseki Nage, for those of you who know it, right? Throwing a big rock, throwing a boulder. And so it's basically a forward throw. But for the basic model, we have to step in, catch his arm, turn, check the leg, send him on his way. But the technique is really about catching and maneuvering around and using leverage to handle something that is heavy and unwieldy in a way that puts less wear and tear on you. Right? So way back in the day, right, one of the things that we were helped to understand, right, was that when the Tori, when the defender steps in to catch that arm, there's kind of some backward movement on the shoulders of the uke, of the student playing the role of the attacker. And I know I apologize, those of you who are on audio only, you're on the podcast, Spotify, those kind of things. You're not able to see this, but you can always, at some point jump over onto the YouTube channel and find the episode. 216 is the one we're on now. But anyway, as they move in, because of body position, because of body contact and whatnot, there's this movement of the upper body backwards just a little bit. And so what's the attacker do, right? When we're pushed on, the anterior or the frontal muscles of the body fire to keep us, one, from falling down, but two, to bring us back in there into the fight to throw that next thing. And so the defender, the Tori, right, gets in there and then shifts out of the way, right? They're not grabbing the arm and slinging this person like it's this rough and tumble judo throw, right? They get out of the way, but what are they getting out of the way of? Well, his body sensei. Okay, well, that's only a third of it, right? They're getting out of the way of his body coming back forward into that space. And if our timing is correct and our movement is correct and we have the right leverage point, there's some leeway. Then what ends up happening is we catch him in motion and we exacerbate. We make that motion bigger. And then at the moment he's about to step and catch himself, which means he'll step with the other leg to turn back on us, we shift in and check his leg, so he ends up tripping over it, right? So there's a bunch of little dynamic things in here, because if we can't do this in a controlled situation where we're in this kumyuchi, this static pose, and we're creating an opportunity for him to have to come back in, right? We're making him move, okay? Then it's going to be really, really difficult for us to do this correctly when he's coming in with, and I think, James, did we demonstrate that for one of the techniques that are going out when we did Ganseki? Did I have you throw like 3 punches and I shifted and then caught one and then shifted out of the way? So I caught the second punch, and then when the third punch came in to drill me in the face, that's when I shifted out of the way, and that movement was simultaneously an evasion and the throw, right? So, because in a fight situation, there's only 2 ways to create motion, or to get the energy that you need to do one of these techniques. And that is either he's already sending something in your direction and you're going to catch it and send it off in a slightly different direction, so it breaks his balance, or you have to do something that he adjusts to, and then when he comes back in, right? So either he's doing it or you have to create it, right? But without that dynamic, it's just this rough wrestling kind of stuff. It's no different than what everybody else is doing. But if it's all based on what everybody else is doing, and what everybody else is, or most everybody else is doing, is based on rank and age and size and build and strength level, right? Then shit. That means that it's starting out as a fair fight, except that from my experience as both the target of said kind of violence and as a police officer and whatnot that had to deal with those kind of things, that's rarely, if ever, the case, right? I get it. 2 bulls in a bar on a Saturday night fighting over the girl, or each of them has a chip on their shoulder, and it looks like a high school fight, or one out in the parking lot or whatever, right? But one that's actually an actual physical attack, right? It's not even, right? And so this stuff is based around that. Anyway, right? So how did I get to that, James? I don't know. Anyway, so we'll just jump over to something else. Okay. So let's do one more of these little quotes here, because what I really want to do is I want to get to some phrases that people use that we just take them as everyday things. All right. But one, the original meaning and intent behind them wasn't the same. Two, if we let these things creep into our system, then subconsciously and unconsciously, they become a part of our perspective on ourselves, on the world, on our capabilities and whatnot. And they're in there like a festering wound, diminishing our potential, diminishing our ability, right? Hampering our attempts at success. So anyway, for any of you who are on Facebook and follow me over there, you may have seen the meme that I posted a couple of days ago, I think, maybe a day or two. And I posted it on the KUDEN Facebook page. So if you're regularly in there, you probably saw it. But there was this theoretical physicist. He passed away in 1988, I think. His name was Richard Feynard, something like that. Anyway, what the quote was that I passed on was, "We must be careful not to believe things simply because we want them to be true. Right? No one can fool you as easily as you can fool yourself." Right? And this points back to, if any of you have been through any of the Mikyo-based programs or you follow KUDEN regularly, you hear me talk about this one sutra within Mikyo and Buddhism. It's called the Magic Show of the Mind. Right? It's a teaching on the magic show of the mind, and in that teaching, it's in story form. It's like a big parable, right? And the magician, the illusionist, is our own ego, right? And it's in there just creating this grand illusion, right? And so we need to one, know that that's what's going on, right? And then two, be mindful of our own thoughts, words, and actions that point to the distractions, the deceptions, the misdirections and whatnot, to keep us away from seeing what's really true. Okay. And that includes anger and all kinds of things. Right. So anyway, so like I said, I want to highlight a few common phrases that are often used. I don't think that people use them to mean the exact opposite. They think they learned them. Honestly, they think that the way they learned them is the way they're used. And a lot of this stuff happened when we were kids, right? We listened to things that mom and dad and elders and teachers and people that we respected and whatnot said, and we took it at heart. One of the problems with that is we weren't old enough and didn't have the discerning faculties to ask an important question. Well, two important questions. One, where did they get that information? And two, did they validate it to make sure it was absolutely true? That's usually not the way things work, right? Which is why the first link in the 12-fold chain of dependent origination it's not just ignorance, but it's a picture of an old blind guy with a rope tied around his waist, and it's led back to a younger person who's holding it like a leash, and they're blind too. Get it? The blind leading the blind. Right? So it kind of leads to questioning, like, where the hell did we get this stuff? And the people that we got it from, did they do their due diligence, or is this just another case of the blind leading the blind leading the blind? You know, that kind of thing, right? So, but again, these phrases, they started out one way, right? But they're being used in a very different way from what their original intent was, right? And then that ends up leading to a state of limited potential, and even a state of laziness, right? And maybe it's active laziness, which sounds like an oxymoron, right? Active laziness. Well, if you're lazy, you're not active. No. I mean intentional laziness, or one based on almost a depressed surrender. Okay, I've got a phrase for that one too, right? But first, We can walk around the mandala, right? The 5 realms of the mandala of ultimate universal truth. And again, for those of you who don't know this one, it's no big deal. But if you took a piece of paper and drew 5 circles on it in the form of a Roman cross, right? So put one in the middle, one directly above it, one directly below it, one to the left, one to the right. Then you'd have this kind of a layout, right? And so normally when I do this little walk around the mandala, we're looking at things from 5 different perspectives. Okay? You don't need the mandala. I just have 5 questions that just naturally spring from each of these areas. As a matter of fact, to do everybody a favor, and if you actually need this to be there, then that's like putting the cart before the horse. What's more important is the questions and the work to be done that the questions point to, than where the hell they are on a picture. Okay. So anyway, so these are questions to ask ourselves, right? About any phrase or any word. Now, you don't need to worry about the and all. I'm talking about things that just seem to be easy. They just fall out, right? And once I go through the handful of examples that I have, that'll point you in a better direction, right? But here are these questions, right? 1, where did it come from, right? Who did I get it from? Is it just something that everybody in society says, so I don't remember who I heard it from? It's just like everybody says it. Whatever. Where did it come from? Okay. But on the enlightened side is, where did it come from? Okay. Because some things came from ancient Greece. Some things started 20s to the 40s, give or take, in the U.S. Right? Whatever. Right? 2, what was its original meaning? Right? Do I know? Do I know what that original meaning is? Right? Or do I have an assumptive belief or definition? Right? Well, that's what it sounds like it means to me. Yeah, I know people do that with our art all the time. Okay, they'll hear a phrase, or they'll see a technique, or they'll see a posture or whatever, and they'll just make a snap judgment. Well, that looks like, so therefore it must be. Okay, everything all the way down to words like kamae, right, for posture. And I'm still, this art hit this country first time very lightly, hanging out around the Atlanta, Georgia area with Stephen Hayes in 78-ish, 75 to 78. And then after that, right, 78, I got involved in late 80, early 81. So it's been around for a little while, right? You'd think by this time, people in the damn art itself wouldn't be translating kamae as stance. Right? Especially when you can ask GPT, whatever the hell it is. Anyway, or you can do a Google search, right? What does kamae mean? Does kamae mean stance? Sometimes it'll tell you what could be, but the word for stance is dachi, right? But there it is, right? So, but what does it mean? Okay, what was its original meaning? Does it mean what I think it means? All right. Next question is, how does it serve me? Okay, what do I get out of, or what am I able to do with? Right, what's the value of this particular definition? All right. Remember, there's always a payoff. Okay? In the core teachings of our Mikyo, the secret knowledge, the enlightenment teachings, at the core of those teachings, there is a lesson that the unenlightened mind, the ego-driven mind, will always do things for one of 2 reasons: to gain pleasure or to avoid pain. Okay? There's always a payoff. The unenlightened mind doesn't do anything without a promise of a reward or a threat of punishment. It's very different from the enlightened mind, where one acts because it's the right thing to do, right? Not the dogmatic thing to do, not the righteous thing to do, It's the right, appropriate thing to do in that moment. It's very different. Okay? So it's kind of like when somebody, I was going to use this one later, but I'll just borrow it now. It's kind of like when students in school, right? Teacher starts teaching something and a student puts their hand up. Yes, Jeffrey, what can I do for you? Is this on the test? So that question is an older question, but its original intent was to allow someone to focus their study habits so that they could stay within the confines of this particular class, this particular level, right? So I'm learning, right? As opposed to only paying attention if something is on the test, because, see, I'm more focused on external benefits, grades, than I am on internal benefits, knowing and understanding, or learning and understanding. Okay, the intent behind the question. Okay, but the reality from a Miko perspective is, it's all a test. Everything's a test, right? So let's see. So, but how does it serve me, right? Because I don't know if you know anybody that learned something or had always been doing something, and then somebody corrected them and said, "Look, I mean, the way you're using that word is not right. It's this way, or this thing, right, is supposed to work this way," and they choose to still do it the way they've always done it. Okay, well, this is how I do it. Okay, well, there's a reason that people are confused around you or don't like to have conversations with you, because you don't make any sense. Okay. Anybody as old as me and remember a show a bunch of years back called In Living Color? I think it's where Jim Carrey got his major break. James, do you remember that show? Right, the Wayans brothers and all that were on there, and Jamie Foxx and those kind of guys. And one of them played this prison like lawyer or whatever. Do you know what I'm talking about? Right, and he would go on this long spiel, this long diatribe about some random topic, and he would just misuse big words, and it was just hilarious. But anyway, because he's a lawyer, he has to sound smart. Anyway, all right. So what's my payoff, right? How does it serve me? Is it serving me to move me in the direction that I say I want to be going, or does it serve to let everybody in the world know that I'm just not into things and I'm going to do whatever I need to get out of work, or sound like I know what I'm talking about, or whatever. Okay. Next question, right? Am I using this phrase or this word mindfully to produce what I say I want to produce, right? Am I using it mindfully, or does it just fall out? It's just something I say all the time. People knock me for saying the word right at the end of a sentence, but the word right, when I say it, has a question mark attached to it. There's a little bit of inflection, right? Because I'm asking for agreement. You always say right. Okay, well, do you get it? Or I say whatever. It's my et al. The list goes on, or there's other ways of looking at it, kind of thing, right? And then the last one is, am I choosing my words carefully and mindfully as tools, right? Or am I just, or am I using them just to convey what what ego wants to believe, right? So what's my agenda, right? What is it, right? Am I using them mindfully to communicate clearly, to develop relationships, to make sure the communications are honest, trustworthy, sincere, those kind of things, Makoto, right? Or is it just to get what I want? right? How with everybody else. Okay. So anyway, you can run these things through. I wanted to throw that up front before we jump into some of these phrases, but I should have probably already made a kind of a bridge in here before this. So let's do this now. Before I go into some of these phrases and potentially piss some people off. Hey, I use that. What the hell are you trying to say? I'm just teaching. I don't even know who the hell's on. So speaking of which, and I wrote these notes way earlier in the day. So James, who's on other than you and me? Anybody?
Jared, Terrence, Dave, and Trinity have all said good evening.
Good evening. Reminds me of a conversation I had. You know who Mark McYoung is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He posted, he does a lot of writing, and he posted this meme earlier that was, what did he say? It was like an old writer's thought. Come up with a new analogy or reference so younger readers aren't lost, right? And then we went into describing things, and I said, I run into this thing all the time in class. I had to switch out from, all right, stick your arm straight out in front of you like Frankenstein, get crickets from the kids. I had to change that to zombie, and then that, somebody else mentioned that reference point's on its way out, and it won't be a thing here soon. And then Mark said something about zombies. I can't remember what his phrase was about zombies, and I said, yeah, the living and the dead, right? Because there is nothing quite like me leaving my house and driving to the dojo and going past the local high school, and when they're getting out of school, and watching the zombies staring just blankly at the screen in front of them and bumping into people and almost walking out into traffic. And, so anyway, so good evening, the Dracula thing. I don't even know how many people, unless it's maybe a thing in Hot Topic or who knows. And some of these things come back. My wife just bought a mini backpack for like when we go on cruises and go on our little hiking jaunts and all that, and has these old classic monsters on it, like the creature from the Black Lagoon and those kind of things. See, you're nodding like you understand. Other people will be like, crickets, right? Anyway, right. So any questions or comments that I can field before?
Terrence posted a question. If I posted careless speech in the past on the internet, could that speech undermine my current potential even if no one reads it anymore?
I don't know. Do you still do it? What's the potential of it coming back out again? So this is a trick question, isn't it? This is like, Sensei, if a tree falls in the woods and there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a noise? Is it that kind of question? No. Well, one, things are around forever. Could it? Maybe, right? But see, this points to another thing too, where if I post something, does it undermine or support my credibility, my trustworthiness, right? My perception of readiness to help others or to be a part of a team or whatever. I mean, in today's world, employers, searching for you on social media is like part of the hiring and vetting process. Okay? One of the things they look for, and I would absolutely look for myself, is how you talk about the previous employer. Okay? Just like if I were getting into a relationship, I mean, my wife and I are solid, but if I was single and was looking to get into a relationship, nothing would turn me off more than to sit and listen to this person drone on about, how bad their ex was, because that tells me what they're going to do to me if this doesn't work out. So, um, but that also points to a one-sided perception, right? Just because the job or the employment didn't work out. And I mean, this is talking about, well, that company sucks and I left them and whatever, right? That's like talking about the government, right? Well, the government is the government is a fictitious entity. The company is a fictitious entity. It's a group of people. Which ones did you not get along well with? Or which one or more targeted you or whatever, right? It's not the company, right? Well, the company didn't do anything about it. Again, we're back to the company. That person's higher up that you took things to didn't do anything about it. The company is a fictitious entity. As long as we continue to talk about fictitious entities as though it's the big bad wolf or the big bad giant, and we're ignoring the fact that we had personal interactions with an individual, right? If I get audited by the IRS, I didn't get audited by the IRS. Okay? I received a letter with the IRS. I didn't, but I received a letter with the IRS address on it and whatnot. But it's signed by a particular agent who I will be meeting with. I don't need to convince the IRS of shit. I need to convince Joe Billy Bob Birkenheimer or whatever his name is on the other side of the desk. This is an interpersonal relationship, and I need to communicate with him. Does the IRS have policies? The IRS, current and previous leaders of the IRS, right? Well, this is getting a little anal. I mean, you're getting a little too specific. Really? Okay. Well, if I don't get specific, then if I'm going to operate generally and vaguely, I'm going to get the results I'm going to get are going to be general and vague. So, who am I dealing with? Who am I communicating with? Okay. So, anyway, in another upcoming lesson, I'm not sure if I'm going to do it as a Facebook Live or if I'm going to do it as one of these things. I'm going to bring in a kind of a format that was actually developed by a guy named Edward Deming. He created a system that has come to be known as Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese term, but he used it to help with something called, what he invented was something called TQM, Total Quality Management. That's based on Kaizen. But there's also this other framework that he came up with, and all this stuff was for improvement and making systems better and gearing up for progress and growth, rather than just like throwing shit at the wall and hoping for the best. Right? I think IT people grabbed a hold of this, and the system is called Agile, whatever. Okay, but there's like a 4-part process, and that kind of goes hand in hand with this. So I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. I need to kind of formulate how it would fit in with Ninjutsu and self-defense and warrior-minded people, so that it just doesn't. I need to make sure there's not a cognitive dissonance thing going on. But that points to this idea of cognitive dissonance as well, right? If we're unclear, we are unclear. That sounds less like a rhyme. If we are unclear about how these things are affecting us, we run the risk of developing either beliefs that are at odds with each other, perspectives that are at odds with each other, or goals that are at odds with each other. Okay. For instance, right, I want to be a ninja, but I hate working and I want to do minimum and I'm a lazy fuck. I do anything I can to get out of work. Okay. Those two cannot coexist in the same time and space. Period. Okay? Not my job. Ninja are problem solvers. So whatever I'm dealing with in the moment is my fucking job. Sorry, did I get a little bit heated? I apologize. Let me back off the F word and I'll back it down to frickin' or something like that. Right? So we run the risk of just flat out getting in our own way. Okay. I'm going to start from a general perspective today, which is ignorance. So I don't know. Terrence, to get back to your question, I don't know if it's out there and someone who did read it years ago and for whatever reason, right? You meet them, things are going well, and all of a sudden they remember, oh yeah, you know what? We were connected, and I read, and then they remembered they read that thing. Yeah. Okay. Karma doesn't go away. Okay. You need to cook it. We need to allow it to cook itself off. Now, the cooking of itself off will be when they remember this thing and what that's going to lead to, right? Because all karma leads to fruition. It's like a planted seed. Right? As a matter of fact, the Sanskrit word, I can't remember the word at the moment, for these things, these bad habits, beliefs, whatever, that are in subconscious storehouse, just waiting for the right conditions, right? The translation of the word that I remember, I can't forget that, right? Jigai Sensei taught me that burned into my mind. The translation is stinking seed. It's just waiting for the right conditions to bloom. However, how much it affects you are going to be different because all karma must play itself out unless acted upon by an equal or greater karmic force. That does not mean that you can stop the outcome. It will still play out. But if you've put all these other things in play, right? You're a very different person, the way you carry yourself, all the, 99.9% of the evidence that's out there is, you're the smart guy that I think I know. But anyway, it's still going to play itself out because they're going to remember that thing and it's going to pop up and it's going to cause them some pause and they can't not remember it, but you got all this other stuff. Okay. But again, remember, it's been not only being played on by all the stuff that you're putting into motion, but what kind of person are they? Because I don't know about you, but I know a couple of people in my life that they're still holding on to stuff that happened 20 years ago as though it happened yesterday. So who knows? I don't know if it was helpful or not. I hope so. But if you're looking for a definitive yes or no, I can't answer that because there's way too many variables. There's also way too many types of karmic effects. In a couple of the programs we just did, I can't remember where I taught these things. 37 fundamentals, first 7 steps on the path of a Buddha. I think it would have been in one of those two things where we covered several different types of causal, like karma, action. That's what it translates to, but it implies karma, cause and effect. So there's a list of types of causes, and there's 4 base effects. Like there's effect same as the cause, which means I killed somebody, and so either somebody from their family or just somebody random in the world, right? Kill somebody that I love, okay? Or kills me, right? There's effect similar to the cause. There's effect. Anyway, it's 4 of these things, right? Because I killed, killing will still go on in the world, right? So, or you'll still see examples of killing in the world because you're tuned into it, all those kind of things. Anyway, all right. So, anything else, James?
Terrence said that helped. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of these phrases that most people are like, "What's the fucking big deal, man?" I mean, it's just something I say. Yeah, I know, but this goes directly to what Clarence was just talking about. If I posted something, okay? If a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound? Okay. See, there's two different ways to say that. Does it make a sound? And does it make a noise? Noise is a negative or grating sound that is unpleasant. That's the definition of noise, generally. Okay. Sound is vibration created by friction of one surface against another. So it's a frequency. Okay. So the question, if nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, see, now we're implying ears. If you say, does it make a sound that is audible to the human ear? That's a different question. And I know a lot of people think that this is too specific, but that mindset that thinks it's too specific doesn't want to have to think too much. Because again, vagueness begets vagueness. Okay? Enlightenment is in the answers, not in the questions. I'm sorry, it's in the questions, not in the answers. And the answers that we get are in direct relationship. The quality of the answer is directly related to the quality of the question. Okay. So again, one of the phrases I use in my school, no lazy ninja in my dojo. So anyway, but it directly relates to that, where if I say something, even if nobody else hears it, I hear it. It affects me. It affects me on a conscious level, a subconscious, and an unconscious level. Okay? It produces all kinds of effects on the inside that are then connected with future thoughts, decisions, plans, actions, perspectives, all kinds of things. Okay, so nobody else has to hear it. This is like when somebody says, well, the thoughts I have in my head, man, it's a good thing I don't say them out loud. Right? And since I didn't say it out loud, doesn't count. Yeah, it does. Right? Just because nobody else knows that you said it, right, it's still affecting your reality. Right? And every time we do it, science, for the people that like the science side of things, right, it produces certain neural pathways that just make it easier to do that the next time. It's like shooting somebody. Well, I'll not discuss how I know this, but the hardest time is the first time. Hitting somebody, cutting somebody. Gets easier. Okay? Lying just gets easier. Especially if you get away with it. Anyway, all right, so let's take a look at a couple of these things. Again, they're going to sound really, really odd. They're not Japanese, anything like that. But you know what? Let me go back to a couple of notes here that I really wanted to make sure that I highlight before I jump into those. Sorry for leaving the open loop, but not far enough. All the way back here. Okay, so this Makoto, okay, it points to an alignment. An alignment between your words and your actions, right? Integrity. And this alignment fosters trustworthiness and reliability, right? Which is essential. There's essential elements for personal and professional success, right? Makoto highlights the importance of speaking truthfully and encourages individuals that are mindful of this thing, right? To avoid using words carelessly. Okay. So again, I discussed the specificity and mindful use, but let's take a look at these things, right? So the first one I want to talk about is low man on the totem pole. I don't know, man. Don't ask me. I'm just a low man on the totem pole. You ever heard that? Okay. You ever seen a totem pole? Yeah, we know what a totem pole is, right? got this guy down here, and there's somebody on top of that, somebody on top of that, somebody on top of that, right? Okay. Except in the native cultures that employ these totems, the low man on the totem pole is the strongest, most powerful person. They're the leader. They're the most influential. Okay. They're carrying everyone else on their shoulders. They're not the peon that's being treaded on or stomped on. They don't have the, well, I'm not going to say they don't have the weight of the world on their shoulders, but right, the amount of knowledge, skill, intent, willingness, resolve, and whatnot they have to be in that position so that everyone above them is okay. Right? They have the greater abilities. Okay? But you bring in someone who doesn't know about this thing, and they see all this stuff, right? And they come in with a different paradigm, right? It's kind of like, on a scale of 1 to 10, okay, with 1 being least and 10 being best, grade this thing, or what did you think about this sake or whatever, right? And then, you go to a Japanese restaurant, you find out that the sake that you're drinking is Ichiban, number 1. Oh, where do we get the number 10 stuff? No. You don't want the number 10. You don't want the number 10. No, I want the number 10. You don't tell me I don't want the number 10. Price is no object. Well, then you definitely want the number 1. Okay? Because Ichiban, number 1 in Japanese, means best. Okay? I didn't learn that in Japan. I learned it during my first stint with the military in Korea. Because in English, a Korean person that was, if I showed up on a scene as a military policeman and I had a Korean witness who was doing their best with English and trying to explain these things, right? They would go, oh, number 10 GI, right? Just number 10 is worst, right? They're just, that it's a different scale. But you bring somebody in with the 1 to 10 scale where 10 is best or top is best, right? He's the guy on top, right? And then you have them look at a totem pole, they make an assumption, and then next thing you know, you got an entire freaking population of people that feel a certain way or that want to be left the hell alone but still get a paycheck, shucking responsibilities, whatever, using this phrase, low man on the totem pole. Oh, and you're definitely the guy I want to talk to. You've got all the answers. You're the guy holding this organization together. Wait, what are you talking about? I confuse people all the time when I do that. Okay. So, but what does using that phrase? If we ran that through those questions, now you know where it came from. Now you know what it really means. What's the value in using one definition over the other? Depends on intent, right? Okay. Somebody who wants to shuck responsibility or owns victimhood, those kind of things, is absolutely going to hold on to just low man on the totem pole, man. No. I don't know anything. Talk to Bob over there. Okay. But the goal that I want to have is this warrior protector, this goal that I want to have of being able to support my family, to be able to go where I want to go, without having to, feel life grating on me and stuff like that, right? Yeah, absolutely, right? So it doesn't matter which solution you use, right? I want to be the guy on top. I want to be the head of the organization. I want to fly my own plane. I want to control my own life, right? If you think about that perspective, that's fine. Then don't ever use low man on the totem pole, because until you shuck the old definition, it's just going to convolute things. It's just going to muddy the waters, okay? But if you focus on the low man on the totem pole, see, when I do that, I have a different way of gauging the guy on top, because just because he's on top and just because he has a name badge or a job title that is a leadership job title doesn't mean he isn't just as guilty of clock watching and shucking responsibilities and whatnot as the guy on the floor who is always late but calls ahead and gets somebody to clock in for him. Right? See, I found a way to still get my paycheck and still get the benefits, but can't seem to use any kind of discipline to manage myself, my time, those kind of things. Right. All right. So lowest man on the totem pole is not the peon. Okay. It's the leader. It's the uber strong leader. Right. Next one. Good enough for government work. Okay. You know anybody that says that? Good enough for government work. Okay. What does it mean? What does it usually mean when people say it? It's good enough. Minimal effort. It's good enough to just get it out the door, right? Okay. And it points to minimal to mediocrity or mediocre results at best. But have you ever visited your state's capital or the nation's capital, or I don't care where, Dublin, London, wherever you are, right? Okay. What do those government buildings look like? Now, I feel bad for you if they were like just rebuilt recently and they look like shit. But the ones in my area and when I go to DC and stuff, granite, marble, all kinds of stuff, right? Gold leaf inlay, right? You imagine people with a good enough for government work, current definition mentality, building something like that? I can't. Right? So this phrase was very, very popular around World War II, specifically, but it dates farther back. Right? It just became very, very popular during that time because to be a subcontractor for or to work under contract for the government had high exacting standards. You had to cross your T's, dot your I's, or they were going to get somebody else because things had to be right. Right? Here's a negative example of how things aren't that way in some places. Right? A lot of you know that I was a soldier. Now, I went in as a military policeman, but what that means is that if I'm not working as a cop, then I'm pretty much an infantryman, right? So you still have to learn the whole soldier thing, right? And one of those things was throwing a grenade, okay, and how they work and whatnot. So to throw a hand grenade, there's two primary methods, right? The first one is you pull a pin and throw the grenade, and there's a spoon on it. It's the little clip thing that doing springs off. Well, what makes it spring off is there's a hammer. There's this little crescent shape. I don't know what shape they are these days, but then it's a crescent shaped heavy piece of metal that was on a really strong spring that was held down by that spoon, and then that pin went through to keep the whole mechanism down. So when you pull the pin, you better have your hand wrapped around that spoon, right? So you pull that thing out, and then when you let go, that hammer that's in there is on really, really high tension. So what makes the spoon pop off is that hammer, right, kind of kicks it out of the way. And that hammer slams down on a blasting cap that has a 5-second cook-off fuse before it detonates and sets off the charge that's in the grenade, okay? So the exacting standards of the government, aka War Department, Army, whatever, was same thing with the Army Air Force. Our U.S. Air Force actually started out as a branch of the Army before. Anyway, so when they drop these bombs out of planes, right? You might have seen them loading these things way back or whatever, and they had these little tabs on them. Well, they had little pins too, right? And there was a safety nut or bolt that was on this thing. And so these things fall out. There's a propeller that's on the front of this thing. On these old ones, there was a propeller, and it was threaded reversed. So the air pressure of it dropping caused it to reverse spin and come off, because that bolt that propeller is attached to is the detonator rod, right? So anyway, so these things had to work properly, or people died. Okay, so here's the story I'm getting to, right? There's two methods for throwing the grenade. One, you pull the pin, you throw it, the spoon pops off when it leaves your hand, and it goes downrange. 5 seconds later, boom, goes off. Okay. The problem with that is that in close fighting, the bad guy, if he's got some cojones, could pick it up and throw it back. So what you do to keep him from throwing it back is you pull the pin, pop the spoon, and count to 3-1,000, and then you throw it. So that 2 seconds later, 3 seconds later, boom, goes off. Okay. So anyway, fast forward a bunch of years later, and I'm in Grenada helping to rescue medical students, and we drove out the PRA and their advisors and whatnot. And we went back into the guise of military police and whatnot. So we're securing and whatnot these warehouses that were full of everything from bedding to flak jackets, vests, and munitions. And some of the munitions were the ones that were grenades on a handle. Some were, so they were more of the old, what have manifested out of the old German kind of design. I think they were from China. And then there were these other ones that looked like ours, but they were more canister looking, but they were still hand grenades, as we would think of them. And they were Russian built, USSR, the old Soviet Union kind of things, right? So, yeah, they were supposed to have 5 second, 6 second delays on them as well. Yeah, sometimes they go off 10 seconds later. Sometimes they go off 5 or 6 seconds later. Sometimes they go off as soon as you let it go, okay, without throwing it. Quality control, not so great. Okay. But the point here is that the good enough for government work phrase started out being a phrase of admiration and an acknowledgement of a superbly done job. Okay. So it's amazing. I'm as I've learned a bunch of these different phrases and highlighted them and then researched them and whatnot, there's this common thread that just it's like the lazy have hijacked the language. Take something that's perfectly, it points to responsibility, it points to purposefulness, it points to admiration for a job well done, and it gets hijacked and flipped in just the opposite freaking direction. It's amazing to me, right? And they still complain because they're required to do too much. Next thing you know, they'll be complaining because they got bed sores because somebody didn't roll them over. Right? If you've ever worked in medicine. All right. So let's see. How about the phrase "money's the root of all evil"? Okay? That's not the phrase, actually. Right? It's a truncation of it. The actual phrase from the Bible is "the love of money is the root of all evil." Right? And what that lesson is about is somebody who is doing things for money alone. Right? They just want to accumulate a whole bunch, and they're not using it for good. They're just it's just about the money. It's just about the money. It's just about the money, right? That intent is the root of evil, because that person will do anything for money. On the mandala, over in the wind realm, the realm of the warrior, positive, that realm in a positive light, we might say positive wind, right, is the realm of the warrior protector, the one who sacrifices themselves for a greater good. It's the firefighter, the EMT, the police officer, the soldier, the bodyguard, whatever, right? It's the group that volunteers to be the security force for their church, whatever. Okay, that uh, they're willing to do the hard work for something greater than themselves. It's the guy that is a parishioner at church who shows up every week or twice a month or whatever, and surrenders part of his Sunday to cut the grass around the church, so the church doesn't have to pay for an outside thing and dip into the tithings, and that way they can do more good in the community, right? Still sacrificing for greater good. Okay, parents fall into this realm, hopefully, right? Negative wind, same soldier, same guy, right? Okay. Now what we have are mercenaries. I don't care what your cause is. Okay. It's the bodyguard that'll work for a drug cartel or whatever. Okay. Got a job, getting a paycheck. I don't give a shit what you do. So is there a paycheck in it? Fantastic. Okay. What's your cause? Great. Sign me up. I'll be on your army. Okay. So it's okay. It's not money itself. Money's a tool, right? Unless you want to go back to a barter system, you better have a damn farm or hope that whoever has what you needs what you have. Right? So again, these things get truncated and then they get skewed. And then they're very attractive to people who don't have any, or use it as a deflection, right, for making bad choices. And I think in a recent, James, correct me if I'm wrong, in a recent episode, we discussed like excluding options, right? So we could get ahead. James's picture's fading. I don't know if he's got some video things going on or whatever, but anyway, so I think we did something on successful people when they're teaching their kids how to do things and whatnot, right? One of the things that they teach them that typically the poor and middle class don't is poor and middle class will say, look, get a job, make money. You don't have to like it, but that's just the way it works. Okay. The rich and successful say, look, what level do you want to be at? What do you need to produce that? Great. Now, what kind of jobs or what kind of positions or professions will allow for that? Now, everything else gets excluded. Unless they're a teenager and they're teaching them work ethic, in which case, go knock on the neighbor's doors and cut grass. Right? My daughter Trinity, we just had this conversation not too long ago. Right? We were talking about work ethic and doing what needed to be done, and creative problem solving and whatnot. And she did this thing for, trying to have to correct me, I think 2-3 years in a row. But she wanted to get horseback riding lessons. And we were doing summer camps at that point, ninja summer camps for kids in the area. And she obviously was always in these because she's my kid. And but in most of the camps, we would wire in a day where we would take them to a local farm where the person who owned the place was a champion riding coach. And so we'd take the kids out there and they would get horse lessons. They would learn how to care for the horse, how they get saddled and bridled and all that kind of stuff. And they, brush them down, all kinds of things. And then they would get a riding lesson out in the corral, and they'd come back and they'd learn how to put them away. Right? It was a full day kind of thing. And Trinity decided that she wanted to take horseback riding lessons. And I said, that's expensive and it's not quite in the budget. Well, yeah. And okay, I said, well, I don't know. Maybe, there are always other options. Okay. Other than like mom and dad just foot in the bill. Have you thought about talking to Miss Diana to see if there's any possibility that you could work off part of it, because if you were working off part of it, then maybe your mom and I would be willing to kick in a third to half of it, because then you've got sweat equity in this other part, right? And that's how she worked it out, right? She would go out there for whatever the time was, right? Good part of the summer, every day, right? From morning till later in the afternoon. And I'd pick her up stinky and grungy and all that kind of stuff. And she'd slung hay, but she got like 2 lessons a day, and she paid for her lessons by working, right? And so there were lessons in there, not just the horse riding lessons, and not just, you work off part of your thing, but look, you may not have the money, and they can always say no, but have you thought about talking to them to see if you can work off the tuition? If you can, what can you bring to the table, kind of thing, right? Instead of just shooting yourself in the foot and going, well, we don't have the money for it, so I guess I'm not going to do it, right? But she learned about other ways to do things, also known as the art of negotiation, the art of the proposal, those kind of things. And it wasn't anything major. She wasn't like, buying or selling Trump Tower or whatever. Okay, and don't go all like ape shit because I use the word Trump. Okay? People get all triggered for dumbass reasons. I don't like him. I don't care. There's lots of things in the world I don't like either, but I don't feel the need to blurt it out or my mind chase it down a freaking dark alley just because somebody used the term or used the word or brought up the reference or whatever. Anyway, all right. So let's do let's see. Let's do this one. How about have you ever heard great minds think alike? Well, come on, Sensei. How can that one be fucking bad? How can that be negative? Great minds think alike, right, James? Great minds think alike. Okay. But when do you usually hear that? Right? It's usually accidental. Right? 2 people say the same thing at the same time, or somebody says something and the other person goes, I was just going to say that. Oh, great minds think alike. Okay. Well, the original reasoning behind this was that people, like intelligent people, could be working on something and working to solve the problem, and may have incidentally come up with the same solution, run the same process, whatever. Okay. But it's not a sure sign of intelligence. Okay. So great minds think alike is that it points to great minds typically are focused on critical thinking. They gather evidence and data, and they work a process to solve the problem, right? They're not just throwing band-aids on things to fix it today, right? Hope nothing happens tomorrow, whatever, okay? There's a way that they go about solving problems, but the way it's used today is more accidental or comforting, right? Like, we both think the same, so what we think must be right. But the reality is that we all hang out with people just like us. So yeah, they think the same, but it's not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of what? It's a sign of groupthink. Okay. That doesn't make it intelligent. It just means I'm hanging out with people who think the same way. And if I need to think differently, or I need to have better thinking skills, then that's going to be an anchor, right? And I've got another one, but we'll just finish up with this last one, right? And it's the phrase, "Why bother? Why bother?" Okay, we've all heard people say that, right? Why bother? It's not going to do any good anyway. Why bother? Except that's not the origin of the phrase. The origin of the phrase had a different inflection to it, and it was a rhetorical question, right? That was about something that was obvious that it needed to be done, right? So instead of, why bother, right? The inflection is, why bother? Why bother? Like you had to ask, because it needs to get done. That's why bother. But with a different inflection, why bother? There's nothing you can do about it, right? It just leads to a defeatist or comes from a defeatist mindset. Okay, so I know that these things do not sound like they should matter. But in our Mikyo teachings, and as Hatsumi Sensei points out, with discipline, thought, and speech, and we should be as sharp and as specific and as detailed with our speech as we are with our movement. As we say in Mikyo, nothing doesn't matter, which really grates against my English major upbringing, but it gets split. No thing doesn't matter. Why can't you just say everything matters? Because it doesn't make the brain stop. If I say everything matters, people have heard that over and over. Yeah, everything matters. No thing doesn't matter. Wait, what? Okay. Sometimes you need to make the brain stop so it'll pay attention to something before it wakes back up again. So here's the question, right? If we run these things through, where'd it come from? You now know what it means. You now know where it comes from. You know what its true definition is, right? How does the old definition or the new definition serve, right, to get you what you want? What's the agenda? What's the intent? How does it serve the intent? Where is its value? Okay? How can you more precisely or mindfully apply it to get where you want to go? Now, that being said, one of the options is to drop it, to stop using it. But the first thing you have to do is catch yourself saying it, right? And then have a stand-in. Right? That's what I did for a long time. Once I got these lessons, and it wasn't specifically about these things, but it was catching myself saying certain things that led to a victim or less than empowered kind of state. The first thing was to catch myself doing it, and then what my teachers had me do was develop a script, right? And it wasn't very difficult. It was just like, Jeff, you suck. And again, that's just, I don't know that I ever said that because I don't remember anymore. But if that's what I caught myself saying, I would go, no, you don't know how to do this at the moment, or you missed an opportunity, right? Just need to be more mindful. The fact that I made a mistake or I did or didn't do this thing has no bearing on my self-esteem, my value as a human being, that kind of thing, right? And so it just got easier and easier. Eventually, I would catch myself start to even think it, and I could just nix it. Okay, but in the beginning, and then with that script, and it usually wasn't as long as what I just said, but it was something that for every time I would say that thing, I would apply the script 3 to 5 times for every one time I said it. I would just run it in my head. Okay? Sometimes I said it out loud, but I just run it in my head because that goes into subconscious storehouse. And until you overwhelm all the stinking seeds from all the times that Jeff said you suck, not you, Jeff, right? You're not gonna hit break even, and it's not gonna counterbalance. Okay, so there's a whole process to this. Okay, and yes, before I got involved in Mikyo with Reverend Jikai, which I came to through the back door through this art, all of these lessons came from Hatsumi Sensei, Stephen Hayes, Shoshi Malmstrom, right? Nimpo teachers came from this. Not believe it or not, And some of you guys know this because you're old, but believe it or not, this art wasn't always just Budo Taijutsu and punching, kicking, and throwing. And in my dojo and in my realm, still isn't. But anyway, all right. So quick little moment here for some questions, and then I've got a couple of admin announcements because we have some new seminars and whatnot coming up on the calendar, and I want to make sure everybody gets that. Again, if you're listening to this in the future, on a podcast service or whatever, and it's past a date that I've already mentioned, chances are you missed it. Right? We do video record a lot of things that may be offered out, but just that should go without saying. But it doesn't happen so much anymore. But James, remember when we were making the transition from one of the sites to the other ones? Every once in a while, we get an email in from somebody who is trying to sign up for a seminar that, like, we forgot to take the page down, and like the seminar was over like 2 years ago, 2 years prior, something like that. Like, and it's written right there. How many times do I have to put it at the top, right? Big old freaking. Anyway, sorry. I want to be a ninja. Well, first of all, pay attention to what's right in front of you, because that's going to be helpful before I can have you start paying attention to shit that most people can't see. Right. So anyway, what do we got? Questions, comments? You have any phrases that you hear people say all the time, or that don't mean what they think they mean? Or did I hit on them?
I think you hit most of the ones that I generally hear on a regular basis from people.
All right. What else we got?
Terrence said, "I'm letting things settle. No questions formed yet."
I have one. Why not? Sorry. All right. That's it. Is that it?
A little bit ago, Victor popped in, said Victor is in the house.
And he had to point it out, didn't he? Wow. Awesome. Hope he's still here. Hope he heard that. He's looking to adopt out some cats, so people need to drive to Florida to pick up a kitten. All right. Well, let me get through these announcements. All right. So let's see. August 3rd, right? So in what, 5 weeks now, give or take? We are doing an introduction to sword, which will include some cutting. So if you're local, you get to do some cutting at the academy, right? Not the academy, right? Don't put any holes and shit in my walls, right? But we're going to do some introduction to sword. So kamae, cutting, a couple of kihon pieces, kihon to kihon, and there is a drawing and resheathing kind of pattern that I give folks so they can practice. But there's also some basic etiquette in there as well, not just parts of the sword, but also care. There's a standing and a kneeling bow that's done, and the reason why. Right now, do you have to do these things all the time? No, but there isn't just this. When people think of warrior, right, they think of just, all out to kill and whatever. But there are multiple ways to hand a sword to somebody. There are ways to display it. There are ways to carry it, and they all mean something different, right? If I'm doing a kneeling bow, where that sword is in relation to my body, in front, to left side, to the right side, edge in, edge out, they all have specific meanings, and they communicate to everybody else around me what my intentions are or what my concerns are. Okay. So anyway, and then November 8th through the 10th is our fall ninja training camp. So the theme that I have set for that tentatively right now is body, mind, and spirit. So we're going to be focusing on not just the fight skills for body and not just psychology things, but I mean like integration of. Okay, so what do we mean in like a technique, or if we're in a combat situation with somebody, right? What's the body stuff? What's the mind stuff? What's the spirit stuff? How does, right? How are we communicating across that space between them and I, right? There's some lessons from the Gyoko school and places like that that tie things in on a deeper level, and also a connection with the divine. I know a lot of people have peeled that stuff out because they're devout atheists. So anything that's in an art or whatever that has anything to do with any of that stuff, they're just going to nix that. You know, so they're just going to do whatever. Okay. Not for me to say, but if you come to my seminar, you're going to have to sit through it. And then January, normally our Daikomyosai is the first weekend after the first, right after New Year's. But this year, New Year's falls on a Wednesday. And so we got to thinking that people are probably going to extend their vacation through the weekend. And so probably wouldn't have been that easy for that. So this will be one of those years where we have to push it back a little bit farther. So Daikomyosai 25 is going to be January 10th to the 12th. So the second full weekend in January. Okay. And I have yet to pick a theme for that. I will have one out by the end of the week because everything's going up on the event stuff. The early registration discounts will be set in place and people can start enrolling and signing up. I will also be sending out, especially for fall camp and Daikomyosai, I'll be sending out invitation and communications with some folks that I'm connected with that are Shidoshi or above, or at least have specialized skill sets, because sometimes I have people do breakout sessions that they're not even black belts, but they have very specific skill sets that could really help people have that diverse skill set. There's another phrase, jack of all trades, master of none, which is not the full phrase. Jack of all trades, master of none is still better than a master of, or not a master at all, something like that. So you've got somebody who has a diverse, it's a ninja, right? Somebody who has a broad skill base so that wherever they find themselves, they can at least help, right? And that's better than somebody who hasn't bothered to apply themselves at all. So, or doesn't have the capacity to be a master of anything. Anyway, all right. So, anybody have any theme kind of ideas? You can always send them to me for Daikomyosai. We'll probably have at least. We'll try. We try to have most of those things recorded or virtual or whatever, but this fall camp coming up, I'm really itching to get back to our old format where we did a bunch of stuff outside, and that becomes very, very difficult to do things via Zoom. So I'm not here to exclude anybody or whatever, but I do think that the new normal that people got convinced of based on COVID, right? Everybody thinks they can sit on their ass and watch things. But now, most of the guys that show up for my Zoom training and all that don't sit on their ass, right? They're actually up doing things. But if there's one thing that COVID taught me is that people won't even train even if they don't have to leave the damn house, right? So it is what it is. There's another one. It is what it is means that is the nature of that thing, and you need to adapt to it and operate based on that reality, not a dismissal and an acceptance that there's nothing you can do whatsoever, so there's no point in even trying. It is what it is. Change the inflection, you change everything. Okay, change the meaning, you change everything. All right, James, last call for questions.
Trinity said, "The blood is thicker than water," quote, always interested me.
Yeah. Actually, I have that. That's the one I skipped over, right? Blood is thicker than water. It's not the quote, right? The blood of the covenant or the blood of the brotherhood is thicker than the water of the womb, which means that the friendships and connections that you make as you move out into the world are often, usually, much stronger than the bonds that are assumed because you came from the same family. And coming from a military and law enforcement background, people in my family cannot possibly understand going through that kind of those kind of experiences, and that bonds you in a way that, you know. But this also points to like willingness to have somebody's back because you know they have yours, as opposed to an implied, well, I'm supposed to have their back because they're my brother, they're my family, they're my whatever. Okay? Those kind of things can often, and again, it's not a picking either or. It's recognizing mutually beneficial relationships and how that creates unity and strength. But yep, that's a really good one. Blood is thicker than water. Yeah, but that's not. A lot of these things just end up getting truncated. So, did she have anything else to add on top of that?
No.
Okay.
What did I see?
Dad has weird hobbies, but then so does my daughter. See, great minds think alike. She was thinking that. Anyway, what else we got?
Victor said, "I heard that." Mrs. Kraus / Benson.
Mrs. Kraus / Benson. Okay, you lost me, brother. What's this about the bonds and the going through similar experiences, and or is he just being Victor? What's your Victor vector? What's your vector, Victor? Remember the old airplane movies? Anyway, what did he say?
I assume that was in. You said you hoped he heard that.
Oh, wow. Alrighty then. Is that it? Is that all we got?
Yes.
All right. Well, fantastic. James, have anything else to throw in this fire? No?
No, sir.
Thus have I heard? No? First three words in all the Enlightenment Sutras. Thus have I heard. No. Okay. Well, in that case, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I will leave you stew in your own mental juices. Hopefully that's all you're stewing in. And we'll see you next time on KUDEN. Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.